The corruption trial of Zandile Gumede and 21 others has been delayed, and that's because of a shooting at a witness's premises over the weekend. We have eNCA senior reporter Dasen Thathiah who joins us now. Good morning again, Dasen. Just the details of when this particular matter happened, if it happened over the weekend, was the court not informed? What is the latest?
Very disturbing details coming out of court today. Initially, when we got into court, there was already a slight delay, and that was as a result of the change in legal representation for 3 of the accused in this matter. But that was just one part of the problem, or the delays that were experienced. The other being the information that was placed on the record today by the state. The state saying that the home of the witness who was due to testify today was shot at the weekend. According to the information that they had received, there was a bullet that had entered the property. Unfortunately, no one at that home was harmed. The witness nor her family are safe. But what it has done now is that it's caused fear, and as a result of that, she did not want to proceed today. And beyond that, the implication of this is that the other witnesses that were meant to follow her are also now not prepared to testify as well. So the state's saying that this has now caused a massive delay. They are now frantically trying to work with the investigation team to try to come up with a strategy to look at the possible risk for the next set of witnesses that were due to testify. And just to contextualize this, the witness that would have spoken today was a municipal employee, someone that was an administrative officer. We've been seeing a few of these types of witnesses that have been coming up. There are possibly a few more as well, all of these being municipal employees, and all of them talking about the tender process, the exchange of documents, the various interactions, and all of this leading towards what the state, the type of case that the state is trying to build. So what it effectively means now is that the trial will be delayed at this point, at least until Wednesday. But beyond that, the expectation is that they may not even be ready to proceed on Wednesday, just based on the implications and the fear that has now been created in the witnesses that were due to testify.
This certainly puts a spanner in the works, Dasen, in the sense that if you put yourself in the position of a eThekwini municipality employee who's probably lower down in the ranks, and you have information that could potentially implicate your superiors, the principals in there, and now your life is being threatened while you want to do the right thing and expose corruption and fraud, particularly when it pertains to taxpayers' monies. Is it worth your life? I'm just wondering how else would they get the witnesses to give testimony while protecting them as well from potential harm?
And these are some of the considerations that they now need to look into, and that's what the state prosecutor had said in court, that they would now go back to that investigation team and the investigating officer in particular, and now do that risk analysis, look at who is potentially affected, how can they mitigate this, because there were other concerns that had come up. The defense, for example, said they would like to proceed. They wanted to ensure that maybe the state could reshuffle its witness list and proceed with someone else in the interim. Another defense advocate saying that there's also no confirmed link between that shooting and this case. It could be unrelated. But despite all of that, I mean, all of this that at this point is not proved. There is still an investigation into that shooting that is taking place. But the net implication now is that it means that there is going to be a delay, and it means that those municipal employees that you're talking about will now have to be convinced or protected in order for them to proceed with this case. But this is something that has been building up for a while. At last weekend, we also did speak to IFS. That was the company that was involved in this investigation. And at the time, when we spoke to them, they were saying that there were already allegations of certain witnesses that were intimidated. We had the head of the CIIU saying that he had resigned because of apparent death threats. He was the first witness on the stand. So there have been these types of issues that have been arising, but ultimately it means, for now at least, that the trial will be delayed.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it speaks of the general lack of protection for whistleblowers and just the brazenness. And as you're saying, this could be just an act of criminality, maybe not related to the case. We don't know that for sure. But we also know that there seems to be a culture of victimizing and intimidating whistleblowers to the point of submission where, you know, clear cases of where there had been fatalities for that matter. So it's a real fear that witnesses would have. But so, you know, it means a lot of things for the case, that it could be a mistrial. I'm no lawyer, but there are serious ramifications to this case, Dasen.
It could, and that's, I think, now what the state is really going to have to work on, because in building its case, it has these various elements, the different witnesses that it had expected to call from different entities, from different places. But because we are talking about municipal money, these are municipal tenders that were dished out, you'd understand that on that list that there were a large number of those potential witnesses that had come from within the municipality. So these are now some of the dynamics that have to be discussed. The judge in this case, Charmaine Bolton, saying to the court, saying to rather the state today, that as much as they would want to proceed, and it's important that they proceed, there has been a consensus that the trial needs to move forward. But she also then gave the disclaimer to say that it must proceed, but certainly not at the risk of losing any witnesses or having any of their lives threatened. So this is the balancing act that is now playing out in court, where it seems like there's a consensus for the case to move forward, but this needs to be done very carefully to ensure that everyone is covered and protected.
Yes, you also did an extensive two-part expose just around the flouting of supply chain management processes and tender fraud in eThekwini. So the state seems at this point at face value to have a solid case, and just would want the witnesses to verify that the facts, or to add on to what the case or the state already has on the table. But that cannot proceed without the evidence given by the witnesses. So at this stage, we're not even sure what's going to happen on Wednesday.
That's right. So the next part of this really would be then to brief the witnesses that would have followed. But those are the engagements that need to take place, because it was this shooting and the events that preceded it that has set this ball rolling and has created that fear. So the big question now will be, and that's what needs to come out in court next, is that which will be the next witness to proceed, or how will the matter proceed. We must also not forget that the testimony of Mbuso Ngobo, the head of the CIIU, hasn't been completed, because during the first session earlier this year, he wasn't able to complete his testimony because he fell ill, and that's why they had moved on to the second witness. And it was during that time that he wasn't here that these allegations of death threats then arose. That cross-examination never completed. So that's still a matter that's hanging in the balance. We don't know if he'll even come back. So these are the types of issues that they are grappling with. This matter was meant to continue at least until August. It was set down for a month. So we will hear the next step when we get back to court on Wednesday, and potentially if it doesn't continue on Wednesday, we'll then hear further on Friday. That's the instruction from the judge.
So, and these are untested waters in the sense that we hadn't heard of this particular matter being delayed or adjourned because of a potential or real threat to a witness. So, in the options that are there, whether to get the submission from the witness on camera, and in the interest of transparency or protecting the witness, what are the options there of still getting their evidence submitted in court?
Well, certainly that would be one option that they would need to look at, perhaps not testifying here in person. And I think even before this case, we'd already gotten a sense that there was already a fear that existed, even in the absence of threats, because you'll know that we have had a camera inside this court, but we've been unable to bring any of that witness testimony to our viewers, because very early on in the case, there was a trend that had started where witnesses had decided that they didn't want to appear on camera at all. So that resulted in really just us only being able to provide audio coming out of that court. So that's the tone that the case started with. And it seems now that that matter has been exacerbated. There will have to be different ways looked at in order to get that testimony to verify or to substantiate what the state is claiming. And the state's claim in this case is that there was this alleged criminal enterprise that was running within the eThekwini municipality. It's certainly a complex case for them to prove, but the defense already starting to try its best to poke holes in that version and saying essentially that it has been a witch hunt.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's quite a dilemma in the sense that if you are the witness who's supposed to give testimony in this particular case of where there's 21 accused or 22 co-accused in fraud and tender rigging, etc., in the municipality, some of whom are quite high-ranking or possibly even influential, that you would want to consider certain things, you know, before you even participate any further. Dasen, you know, what do we, in such a case, you know, it could be a mistrial potentially, but there's now possibly 22 others that could potentially be involved in this alleged shooting that, again, could not be necessarily related to the case, you know, if you get my drift.
I think what's going to be important now is for that police investigation to unfold. That's the investigation into the shooting itself. There is also an investigation into the other death threats that had been allegedly leveled at the head of the CIIU. So these are issues that need to be unpacked, because what is going to be very important is to clarify whether those matters are in fact related to the case, so if they have any bearing on the case. Because right now what it's done is that if you look at the timing, that is what has created that fear. That is what has caused today's witness not to testify. So I think that what's going to be important is in determining how the case proceeds is to try to separate those issues or to find out, in fact, if they are related. And that will be one of the possible ways forward. But I can tell you this, that the state certainly has a lot of work to do. It will have to then convince these witnesses to talk, if these are the next municipal witnesses I'm talking about, but also the implication for the other witnesses to follow. But there's also now going to be an onus on the state to look at how it will in fact protect these other witnesses if they do decide to take the stand. So those are the discussions that will take place today, and the investigating team will also be part of that, looking at how they're going to move forward and how quickly they are able to do that.
Are you able to confirm whether you're back in court, or at least the case or the matter is back in court on Wednesday, or will there be an announcement being made on Wednesday on the way forward?
The judge has told the state that they need to indicate to the defense before Wednesday if they will be in a position to proceed. So if they are not, that is a discussion that needs to be had. So Wednesday is really a provisional date, so it's possible that we will end up back in this court on Wednesday. But the judge has said specifically that if not Wednesday, then we will be back at this court on Friday to find out how the matter will proceed.
Much appreciated indeed. That's eNCA's senior reporter Dasen Thathiah. He is at the Durban High Court looking at the case of former Mayor Zandile Gumede and 21 others co-accused in the matter of a 320 million rand tender fraud, including money laundering and flouting of the supply chain management processes. We'll get to him at least by Wednesday, depending on how that unfolds.